Hi everyone, my name is Kathy and this is my YouTube channel called The Daily Marker, and I also have a blog called The Daily Marker. I am here today for Simon Says Stamp. There's a blog hop called Hop to It and there's gorgeous new product, and I wanted to do a video to show you how I use this artful flower set. I just think these flowers are so funky, fun, and different, and I'll be sharing how I use some watercolors on them today. I'm taking my stamps and I just have 3 different blocks, and it's nice just to have them on hand for the ready. So I have some Tim Holtz watercolor paper here. I love it. It's pre-cut. It's a no-brainer. It's got lots of texture. I'm using the textured side here, and I'm just varying these stamps, turning them around and stamping on this piece of paper. I have no plan for this, so I just wanted to kind of wing it and see how it goes. And my camera is by a window, so the lighting keeps changing. Makes it a little more interesting. I'm stamping with Simon Says Stamp black ink, and now I'm just using some watercolors. I'll have a link to them in the description area, but you really can use any watercolors. We're gonna add some highlights later in the video, you'll see, to enrich my colors even more. So you could really just be using an inexpensive watercolor for this technique. I'm just adding some drops of water to the colors I'll be using to soften up the colors in the palette here. And there's 2 sets. These come in a box, but anyway, that's not important. So I will be adding water, which I did earlier, sorry about that, water to the petals first, because then it kind of spreads out and does some of the work for you. And then I like to add another color so they can kind of spread and mix together. So, I'm not thinking too hard about the colors. I don't, I just kind of wing it. So anyway, just wing it, experiment, have fun. You could have a piece of scrap paper next to you to see how the 2 colors blend together, or you could look at a color wheel, but I just like to go with it. So I have some purple here and some red, and I'm just working the water around the paper here. If I have too much of my brush, I dab the color off, or the water, and you have to be careful, the water could drip down the brush. So I flip my paper, I'm moving on to the other side. I kind of want to create a balance with somewhat similar colors. So I just kind of spot doing these colors, as you can see here. And this time with the purple, I'm adding some orange. And then I'll be spreading that around with more water. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit because I'm really just doing the same thing over and over, and I just wanted you to see how I do it, and then I'll come back, of course, and talk some more. Now I'm moving on to the more center flowers, and I want a contrasting color, so I'm going to use some purple and some maybe green. This shows up a little more green in the video, but it's a little more blue. So I'm mixing these 2 together, and I'm going to, again, let the water do the work. And the great thing about watercolor, I can't say it enough, if you have too much water, too much color, you can just take a cloth and remove it and start all over. It's pretty cool. Now I'm going to speed this up because I'm just doing the exact same thing, just moving that color around, adding a little bit more, but I don't want you to miss anything. I just wanted to mention, I'm not trying to sell Tim Holtz watercolor paper, but one of the things that I love about it is it's nice and bright white, and if you don't do a background, the colors really pop off of the card or whatever you're doing, if you frame it or whatever. You can also buy tablets of watercolor paper. There's so much on the market, and you can buy so much on sale. But it's good to experiment and see what works best for you. Some people might not want a bright white, sometimes you want a more softer color. But it's good to have a variety of things. It's just fun. So here I'm mixing some red with a little yellow, a little bit orange. I just have to be careful that the yellow and orange doesn't get too muted. Now you might have noticed I had too much water on that purple flower. I'm going to add some more color to here and dab it off. Again, you know, it's like an eraser. It's just great. I also thought maybe I'll just do a whole swipe of water on this whole thing and then dab it off. But I decided not to do that. If I have more time to play, I might see what effect that is. So I have dried these initial flowers, and now I'm stamping more flowers with Simon Says Stamp black dye ink. I love this ink. It's nice and black. You could use any dye ink. Always experiment on a piece of scrap paper first to make sure. So I've stamped 3 of the larger flowers in the Artful Flowers stamp set, and then 1 of the smaller ones. Now I will be coloring the new flowers I just stamped in some darker colors. And first I'm laying down some water on those petals, and I'm going to be using more intense colors so they look like they're on top of my flowers. And it'll hide, then it will look, because they're darker, the lighter colors will look like it's behind the flowers. I didn't feel like masking, so this is kind of a lazy way to do it. And it's quick and it's easy and it's fun. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up again, and I'm using some of the purple, dark blue, and teal. And you'll see me work these the exact same way I did the others, except they're darker. So I'm moving along on my flower panel here. I'm using some greens and blues and this brilliant cobalt blue on this flower. And you'll see in a minute that if you have too much water or too much color, you can use a wipey or a Kleenex or a towel or something and dab that color off right here. And then you can start over, or you can add a 3rd color. That's really kind of a neat thing to experiment with. Now I'm dabbing some off. I don't want it to run into the other flowers, so I'm removing some of that water. And I'm going to finish up on these other few. When I'm finished with these flowers, I'm going to be adding a dark pink, that like magenta pink, to the background. I'm using a smaller brush, and I'm being more careful because I don't want any bleeding in the flowers. And coloring this dark background will really make the flowers pop. So I'm taking my time, I'm turning the paper, I'm being very careful. I mean, not terribly careful, but somewhat careful. And I'll work my way around this background here. As you can see, the flowers are starting to move off the page and pop. And you could also do like a dark purple or a dark gray. That would look really neat. And I've been finding that when I go to the grocery store and I see a Kleenex box, believe it or not, they have such gorgeous designs, and they serve as really good inspiration for color palettes if you're kind of stumped or you are a little unsure about winging it. Now I've gone and kind of went around the outside edge of these flowers, kind of created an imaginary border. I've also taken a thicker brush and some more water, and now I'm kind of blending that line with more water and a little bit more paint, depending on if it's starting to dry out or not, and just kind of experimenting here to see what's going to work. I'm dipping up into the color a little bit more as well, so there's not a real solid line of color there. I just want it to look a little soft but still be vibrant at the same time. I'm just moving that last bit around, and then I'm going to take a cloth and just soak up some of that water just to make things faster, to move the process along. This happens to be a wipey that's dry, you can, once your wipies dry out, you can use them, hang on to them. So I'm just moving a little bit more of that color around with the smaller brush. It got washed out a little too much with the water. So again, watercolors are just so forgiving. And then I'm going to flip it around and do the other side. Now my paper's dry and I'm just molding it, rolling it, working it. When you dry your paper and do this, it's pretty relatively flat without taping it down. Now something that I like to do, you can totally skip this step. You could just go to the end of the video and see what the card looks like. But I like to use a fine tip marker. I like to outline my markers again so my images will pop. Now right now I'm using a fine tip Sharpie marker, and I'm going to skip over to just a regular Sharpie marker because the watercolor paper, it just works quicker and the line is a little bit bolder. Now I hope you can see a difference. I've also colored the center of each flower in brown and added some white gel pen accents to the centers of each flower. Now let me explain what I'm doing with these colored pencils. These are watercolored pencils for watercoloring. So you could really use watercolor pencils and blend them with a brush on your card. But what I love the texture in this paper, and I wanted to add just a little bit more color. So like on this orangey, purpley, I'm using some purple to highlight just a small portion of each petal. And I missed a spot with I wanted to go over with the Sharpie there. And I'm just kind of staying in the crease, and then I'm lightly skimming over the texture with this watercolor pencil. So you kind of see like little lines, but it just gives it kind of a neat, different look. And I'll zoom in at the end so you can see it better. So I'm just going around each flower, each leaf, and just adding a little highlight and then skimming over each petal with this accent color. I just like to kind of piddle and play. Like you could have been finished with this card, but me, if I have the time, it's enjoyable to do these things. So I just wanted to share that with you. So I'm just moving along on each flower here, adding some highlights with an accent color. I've sped this up so you can see it all in its entirety if you want. And I'm just going to talk about how I finished the card, because this video is just about the watercoloring. So once I was finished with my flowers, I ended up coloring 3 more flowers and cut them out. And then I ran a strip of vellum across the card, and I stamped in the black dye ink my sentiment, and I used a few dots of a glue pen to adhere it to my watercolor card base, and then I pop dotted the flowers and I was done. So it was pretty quick, enjoyable. You can see the watercolor pencil. I hope you can see that texture. Thank you for joining me. I hope you like some of the techniques today. And also I have a giveaway for my YouTube subscribers. There's more details on that on my blog, TheDailyMarker.com. Have a great day.